Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. So, Alhamdulillah wa Alameen wa Rabb al-Kareem. For those that don't know, subhanallah, Rabb al-Azim, indeed. SubhanAllah, it's almost 10 years since I've been on campus at UTSC, and one of the most beautiful, still to this very day, beautiful and majestic places is the Masalla, the place where we pray. Alhamdulillah, Alameen. Now, it's a bit of a tangent away, but what I do want to focus actually on presently is, inshallah ta'ala, sharing with you all, bidhnillahi ta'ala, an upcoming let's say, initiative, fi sabilillah, a fund for our brothers and sisters here at UTSC 10 years later. And Allah knows best. Subhanallah, wa Rabbul Arshil Azim. I really think some people ask me, like, oh, what's your legacy? Many people say, like, oh, like, mashallah, you've done X, Y, Z in different ways, and I don't want to share them because it's just Allah knows. May Allah accept from the little that we do within the MSA and OGA and beyond. Ameen. But subhanallah, when I think about, inshallah, a legacy, at least in one dimension, or in multiple dimensions indeed, be it in teaching or in advocacy, education, etc., or education, philanthropy, service to the community indeed. I think that often, subhanAllah, it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala indeed places the barakah for our brothers and sisters that lead in, unique clubs, accolades, and organizations around the world, right? And even here at home at UTSC. But inshallah ta'ala, I do want to be able to support, even if it's, however small or however large, brother or sister on let's say once a year to be able to inshallah ta'ala support themselves. And I say this for, of course, without question, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is our supporter. He's our sole provider indeed. And what I aim to be is that tool in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses, my efforts to inshallah ta'ala, support our brothers and sisters. And so, subhanallah, I think in fact let's go here inshallah ta'ala to see the scholarship in or like the form itself. So if I go more up, inshallah, here's where you'll see it. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-An'am, ayah 160, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. من جاء بالحسنة فله عشر أمثالها ومن جاء بالسيئات فلا يجزى إلا مثلها وهم لا يظلمون. The translation, subhanallah, and what a powerful, like if you, subhanallah, feel the ayah or, resonates with the ayahs, prelude to resonation, alhamdulillah. Whoever comes, and the translation is, whoever comes with a good deed will be rewarded tenfold. Whoever comes with a bad deed will be punished for only one. For none will be wrong. SubhanAllah, Allah gives you 10. It's maybe hard to see with my hands on Zoom, but 10 good deeds, SubhanAllah, in reward for just one. And if there's one sin, then it's just punished by one, if Allah will. And Allah may even forgive, right? SubhanAllah. As the hadith shows, at that new form. The importance that I find of having this type of scholarship for our brothers and sisters, even if it's just 10 Muslims, one a year in 10 years, right? The goal is that, inshallah ta'ala, you know, they will be, their initiative will be rewarded without question, inshallah ta'ala, in the akhirah. But I aim to support them in the dunya so they continue to please Allah in the dunya for the akhirah, and it's such that all of those that support, all of those that initiate, all of those that market, all of those that advocate for such funds to grow in momentum and spark our golden age, inshallah, will bidnillahi ta'ala lead to many folds, tenfold and inshallah manyfold effects on our entire Ummah to Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam tasliman katheera. And so, with that in mind, um, I just wanted to share that, let's say, you're an MSc board member, you're from IR's Islamic Relief, MSC's Muslim Students Association, or PNDA, or like HOSA, like imagine being a Muslim leader, and often we put our blood, sweat, and tears into these different programs, right? And subhanAllah, I just find it that, you know, how could we perhaps support our brothers and sisters, especially those that are alumni, knowing well, subhanAllah, the tests, but also the amount of responsibility and privilege and honor, dedication and commitment and sincerity that our brothers and sisters have in these types of programs and services, to inshallah ta'ala support them, to motivate them, right? Not to feel like and obviously Allah knows best what's in our hearts and in their hearts, but to support them and acknowledge and appreciate with ta'ala their work for the Ummah at UTSC and beyond. Ta'ala. So some may ask, like what would $1,000 do? Maybe it's just too little. Well, personally, once again, this is fi sabilillah, and actually fi ridatillah, for the sake of Allah, fi sabilillah, the path of Allah, fi ridatillah, for the pleasure of Allah. And this is what I seek, you know, and inshallah ta'ala, that 1,000 may have barakah to last for 10 years in of itself for just one person, or it may even translate to inshallah ta'ala supporting other people for 10 years, or even be more and beyond, right? Or that 1,000 may be invested and used such that it's amplified in value and barakah to $10,000 for 10 years. Allah knows best. Allah knows what's in our hearts, and I only ask from Him what is most pleasing and best in His sight. And Allah knows best. So, even with the numerical stats or data that you can perhaps see here as ideas, there are like at least 10 ways, subhanAllah, as I mentioned in some ways, like investing, it can even be investments at the 10th one, but you really like it could be food, paying food for a family of five, rent, tuition, going Umrah or even Hajj, may Allah allow us to all go for Hajj and Umrah and be rewarded on a daily basis for the adhkar and the different actions that please Him. Ameen Ya Rabbil Alameen. You could be purchasing tech before Ramadan or before Eid. Even could help for commute, right? Many of us take students often take buses or even cars, right? And like it could really help $1,000. Imagine you pay, let's say, $200. Well, if you do 20 days, it's probably going to be $120 a month, 20 weekdays essentially, a month. So then 120 is going to last you about 8 months, subhanAllah, with the press, which is pretty much 2 terms, school terms, subhanAllah. And then 5 months for gas, maybe even more, right? If you have a hybrid, if Allah wills. And orphans, sponsoring orphans, because you don't just have to think of that 1,000 for yourself. Think of it for the entire Ummah, right? And it could be that you support an orphanage. That orphanage has 10 or 100 orphans, subhanallah. And what do they learn? What are they teach? How do they develop themselves? Imagine they learn the Quran. Imagine even 10% of 100 people, of 100 orphans, subhanallah. And we already know the benefit, right? The reward of being close and taking care of our orphan brothers and sisters, being close like, to the Prophet Muhammad SAW, like these two fingers, subhanallah, hakata, subhanallah. So, brothers and sisters, think of it like that, like supporting an orphan, something very dear to me and Bithna'i ta'ala because of Prophet Muhammad SAW, the one I'm named after, Khatimun Nabiyyin, Rahmatul Alameen, As-Sadiqul Ameen, subhanallah al-Azim. He was an orphan, right? So imagine who you could be translating, impacting, in their entire life and their families and their progeny, right? And everyone else that are influenced and impacted by them. Allah knows best. And so, subhanAllah, through OSP, from the embassy at least, and it could be you raising funds, for a family. That could be like 200, it ranges in value, but to get an idea, it could be like $300. And that would be for three orphans. Or even if it's 500, depending on like the geographical location, the severity of their case, could be $500. And even in that case, you're almost doing two, plus if there's any fees, but essentially perhaps almost two orphans, that you could pitch in to support. And then maybe like, supporting charities, raising funds for, a local or international masajid that's aiming to grow or expand. It could be, distributing 100 Qur'ans, through the Clear Quran for Quran project, right? Here based in like in the West, or it could even be outside of our continent and even in Africa, for example, where, subhanAllah, brothers and sisters are, distributing Qur'ans, and you can, subhanAllah, make manifold impact, subhanAllah. Everyone that learns, even just one ayah, one letter, that inshallah ta'ala you get 10 hasanat for. Just imagine 6,236 ayat of the Quran, how many times that's recited, not just by one person, but multiple people. Imagine in Ramadan, imagine in a masjid that you supported to raise funds for. Subhanallah al-Azim wa Rabbul Arshil Kareem. Only Allah knows best. Even we indeed cannot even enumerate the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon us, nor can we ever imagine how much He may reward us for what we do for His sake, Allah, for His rida, and Allah knows best. It could also be, you could be, a waqala, like a waqf for a wheelchair, for our brothers and sisters that may use it in Hajj or Umrah. And imagine when they're making tawaf, when they're going to the different sites, subhanAllah, like on Arafah, the Cave of Hira, in many places, Maqam Ibrahim, subhanAllah al-Azim, wa Rabbul Arshil Kareem. That's another way, right? Allah, and you could support an NGO, or a charity here. It could be like Muslim Welfare Center, or economic book services. So many places, even your local masajid in plural. It could also be raising funds for another Muslim student group, right? Or starting a scholarship of your own, Subhanallah. So, Allah knows best, right? And you can maybe, use it in ways that manyfold increase the impact of this endeavor fi dhatillah wa fi sabilillah. And as well for your pets, if you have any, or if your family's interested in getting a new aquarium for your fishes, or essentially a bigger cage for two birds, right? SubhanAllah, two birds in one cage, and or in one home, SubhanAllah. And maybe, Allah knows us. So now I do want to say, if you can, even if it's, and I say this humbly, to be very honest with you, brothers and sisters, I know it may sound like, it sounds maybe perhaps very motivational. Maybe inshallah ta'ala, you can be amongst both groups, one that's pitching in to support this fundraiser, and one that is actually applying or submitting an application, right? So I do want to say, brothers and sisters, I have this actually saved for 10 years' time, right? So that's why I say 10,000, because the goal is 1,000 per year for a student, right? Muslim student leader, on our campus or beyond. And so I want you to think, brothers and sisters, even if you could share this or just donate like $10. Imagine if you really think about it, for 1 year, we need, inshallah ta'ala, if we can get 100 people just to pitch in $10, that would cover, subhanallah, 1 year for one student, one rising leader. And remember what I just said earlier, like the benefits, and Allah knows best, right? But the amazing ideas and ways you could support this endeavor, they may be here and maybe even beyond, and Allah knows best, right? So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept all of your efforts, all of our efforts to please Him, Jalla Jalaluhu, fi that. Here some examples of what I mentioned earlier. To also help tuition costs as another example. If you're interested as well, like to maybe let's say donate on a yearly basis, even if it's $100, imagine, right? That is like 0.3 uh, dollars, like 30 cents a day for a year, right? But even just think about it like that, $100, right? For 10 people to do it on a yearly basis, or even more, could suffice for the scholarship, and perhaps you donating even as a student group perhaps, or even as an individual donor, donating $1,000 can, even if you reach out, can help actually augment and increase not only the number of years, or perhaps following delegations and the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, um, we seek to please Him, right? And so we'll see how this, Allah knows best. I would just highly, kindly recommend generously donating, especially during the month of Ramadan and even now, to help prepare yourselves, but also to, inshallah ta'ala, share it with your community networks, your group chats, your socials, your families, right? Those that are often, like I wanna really support, those that are struggling. Like you could be, for example, like a senior advisor or president for a Muslim student group, right? And maybe you're struggling, because you've invested even sometimes not only physically, mentally, a lot of energy, but even financially, right? So I hope whoever is chosen and whoever funds with me in this endeavor will do it for the sake of Allah, for Allah, and to inshallah ta'ala, and if Allah wills, um, support this endeavor. And there are two ways. As I mentioned, you could fund. You actually, yeah, essentially you could fund, as I mentioned earlier, and you can apply. Um, Now, I want to highlight a few things, inshallah ta'ala, to really, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept this once again. And I want this to be sincere even for myself. So may Allah forgive me in any moment of ghafla, of insincerity as well, of heedlessness and insincerity, I mean, at any moment in time, for the rest from before, during, now, and from the rest of my life, I mean, Ya Rabbil Alameen. Um, to simplify this, or inshallah, integrate this, the application is divided into three main sections, because you may be wondering, how do I apply, right? So the three sections include the details of this form, right? Actually, let me go back. You have your like biographical information, right? Your professional information is step one, really, including like your CV or resume. That makes up about one third of the application. Within this form, there is a following section that includes your responses or reflections to two short answer questions. I'll make up the second third. And the last third is nominations and student rankings. I think, well, this value, so the number of student rankings, as this is our pilot as well, we'll see. I don't want to make it difficult, because it may be hard to get like, 10 people to essentially nominate you. But we'll see, inshallah ta'ala. This is the last third of essentially nominations, ranking, and, giving your testimonials, which is the previous page shown earlier. But if you scroll down, right? And by the way, the deadline is inshallah ta'ala 5 weeks from now. Specifically, it is the 17th of March, which inshallah ta'ala would be, I just skipped it, the Monday of essentially, oh, subhanallah. Yeah, so subhanallah. The days of the month are very similar with also the Hijri calendar. So it'll be the 17th of Ramadan, 1446 Bismillahi ta'ala. And so to highlight this, I would highly recommend on Maghrib, by the way, is when it's due, 726 Bismillahi ta'ala. So start planning now. That's my advice for anyone who's trying to apply. Start to actually fill in these details. You can literally actually, finish this within a week, or even like, whenever you're free, maybe during reading week, or even now, or like whenever you can. Bismillahi ta'ala. And inshallah ta'ala, this will be a benefit for you and the entire Ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So the personal background shown here, that's the second section I mentioned earlier. Provide your full name, your email, regularly used email, or professional as well. Now, in terms of the following question, your name and position, sorry, the name of the student group and your position in it is key for this present year. So let's say, and it could be more than one, but I'm just going to say it for one as an example. This is like me from the past, so a bit of like stuff a lot. I don't want to be egotistical. May Allah forgive me. But see this as an example, as an idea that you could say as like for your syntax, vice president, comma, right? Like so that's your position within a department or like a team, religious affairs, comma, the organization, UTSA, MSA. If it's an acronym that's not too well versed, you can send details of the social media, but I will also recommend putting the full acronym, full name out. Now, and that's what I did for our golden age. So that's another example of like, your position, the team or the department or the field, and then in the group itself. And you may notice presently, at least, like you may also include external groups. So let's say you're part of the MSA, but also NCCM or Islamic Relief and, Sakina Homes or Nisa Homes and Sakina Canada, for example, right? So there are ideas. There are like different ways that you can, inshallah, be involved. And you may also be involved in other like um, positions. Um, but I would just say group them all up, and you can use a semicolon to essentially separate the different categories. And briefly, I'll just highlight though, include your program, right, at university, and if you're third, second year, fifth year, and when you plan to graduate if you haven't already. Um, and then the third section is actually the second third, or the third section is part two of this application, essentially. Really, the first one was just giving you a heads up as to what, you know, the fund or scholarship is for. And then this third section is your second one or like the second third of really focusing on your reflections. Also, actually attaching, sorry, it incorporates, just to clarify, the first component with your second. So the reason I say this is if you go up, the first includes a CV and resume, and then within that section as well, you'll have the short answer questions. Now, I'll just first say, for those that don't know what a curriculum vitae or CV is, essentially it's like an elaborated, extensive resume, or like I would say biography, listing like your experiences. It could be work, academic, extracurricular, volunteer, etc., and co-curricular as well. And then as well as like your education. And I think actually I should show an example of this just for those that like, because I realize not maybe you may not be aware of what a CV is, and I do want to make sure that I, clearly show an example. I could be, like there are many ways, by the way, to do a CV, to do this actually is going to translate as a PDF, so hopefully it turns out well. But the idea is that you have like different formats, just like for resumes. Resumes are like 2, 3 pages, and you can also work with that for submission. But essentially, a CV is generally speaking longer, and they highlight more professionally what someone has accomplished, years after their, like their research or their pretty much their career. And in academia, like, yes, it can be quite long, but I'm just going to show an example of this. I do want to say, if you don't have a CV, it is okay with going with a resume. I'm just going to go back here because, and as you can see, that's okay. I say this because I mean, of course, if you want to make a CV, I don't want that to be essentially the limiting factor for you. I would say go with a resume, even if it's 3 pages. I'm content, inshallah. But do, if you can, if you have the time, try to highlight the details I've mentioned here, especially, keeping things organized, connecting your experiences with skills, and the results of those experiences is key. So that way you could showcase and demonstrate. Like, let's say you've shown student leadership in this group, for example. Let's say in MSA, and let's say your community services, and you were involved in OSP month, orphan sponsorship, and then a program month, and like, what were the results? Did you raise funds? Did you help raise funds for like using your leadership? Did you host, like, what did you do, right? Like, did you host events? Did you stand as an MC? Did you help volunteer or coordinate volunteers for, let's say, the OSP gala, etc.? And then, like, what were the results, right, of your effort, right? So briefly, and if there's questions, inshallah ta'ala, that could be saved for further seminars or discussions. But the idea is that make it concrete, concise if possible, and 3 pages would be ideal. I would say minimum 3 pages is best. If you have up to two, that's okay. Like, if I'm saying, if you're like a first year student and have shown, demonstrated, excellency within your experiences, may Allah accept it, is what I will say. And Allah knows indeed who will be selected. Not by me, but by His mercy. Ameen, Ya Rabbil Alameen. Now, the second part and second question here is really answering in this second part, really, of, or let's say the final part, second part, we'll say second part of this fund application is these answering these two questions. And I actually would prefer you reading through each question, short answer question, to really describe more comprehensively what, and more, sincerely, of course, uh, and comprehensively, um, and critically, how you would respond, essentially. Like, how, essentially, um, how you have showcased and delivered actionably, like with results and experience through your experiences, um, this your response, essentially. So think of it like this: you're pretty much having, and this is actually what's done often for other places as well, in the sense of like resumes and, like interview questions, for example. Like, now that you've, alhamdulillah, it also reflects OJ's symbols of, like, or not symbols, but like seminars of the past that, highlight the CV or at least the resume and building a cover letter, for example. In a similar way, think of it this being like one experience that you really want to highlight from your resume or CV, and you're gonna highlight them with three key themes, 3 out of the 5, or even more. You can do 5 or even more if you can, within 500 words. Should suffice, inshallah. So let's have a read. As a holistic gift, Islam brings us closest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the sublime, the exalted, the glorified, most glorified indeed, by integrating ihsan, excellency, in every pixel across our lives. I do want to just highlight for here, ihsan is more broad, or actually has a more specific definition. If you could make use of the ones shown in the hadith of Jibreel alayhi salam, that would be amazing. Just as a thought to refer to. Um, but and so I do want you to relate to those traits that you could see here: Islam, inquiry, ingenuity, initiative, inspiration, and maybe use the other ones that you may know of, or be aware from OG as well, but from the ones that are shown here. and inshallah ta'ala showcase what I've mentioned earlier, the results. So like making reference to the situation, the that you were in, right? Be it like you're a director of religious affairs for Islamic Relief, for example, or UTSMSA, and then now connecting this back and or it could be like Islamic Relief UTSC, right? But like you say that's your situation, then you deliver your task, right? So let's say you are, raising funds for orphans, and then the actions that you took, right? So that's pretty much you essentially, be it organizing events, programs, fundraisers, even perhaps tablings or like raising funds more directly through like giving out food that would have proceeds going for orphans, right? That's just an example. That as a good example, inshallah ta'ala. And then you refer to the results, right? Did you raise $500? And what did that lead to? Not just saying like the data, the new numbers themselves, but reflecting as to what they translate to, right? $600, like if you look back to what I mentioned earlier, right? It's a good example. $1,000 just doesn't mean like, I'm not just trying to persuade you that $1,000 is like good for a person to eat food, right? For a single person. But more so, like if you think about it, you could raise food for five people, right? Imagine a father, mother, and three children, two of your siblings and your two parents, inshallah ta'ala, if you have them, right? It could also be that instead of that, it could be distributed other ways. It could be perhaps used some amounts for paying off rent, maybe for your turn in the family, or just helping your parents. Maybe they're getting old. You want to support them with a nice Eid gift, before Ramadan or at the end of after Ramadan, bidhnillahi ta'ala, right? And then it could be also, maybe in your final year of school, and you're paying off your tuition. Or it could be you want to pay off for your friend or for your sibling, right? They're maybe starting off school and maybe don't have the supplies they need, maybe like a computer or a laptop or like a notebook, or you know what I mean? These types of details. Or like Umrah for you or your mother, subhanAllah, Hajj, may Allah accept it for us all, and technology, and you see the list go on, commute orphans, to support orphans, to deliver more works for charity, have more pets in your family and invest if needed, or invest in your akhirah, That's really the first nine and perhaps the 10th as well. You're investing in your akhirah. So think about it like that as well. Um, and just to clarify, I'm just gonna fix this part because I know it may have some things we've like just to and I know if you can do within 300 words, that helps. But if you wanted to go like up to 350, that's okay. I just because it'll if the we'll see how many people apply, and if it's like a lot of people, it may take time to essentially review. But that being said, inshallah ta'ala, the second question I want you to really look into. It's one that's dear to me because it connects not only the strategy that we have for the scholarship to be well versed for the community and those that need it, the fund, but it also connects back to the deen. And I think this is important. As you could tell, I referred to the Quran, right? Surah Al-An'am, ayah 160, and then we're going to the Sunnah of Nabiul Kareem Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So read the hadith, really place close attention to it as you refer to your response, right? And think about how this even connects to Ramadan, because some of you may also be thinking about this during Ramadan and realize, like, subhanAllah, the beauty of inshallah ta'ala magnifying and amplifying your impact during the blessed month, Shahr Ramadan, Shahr Mubarak, subhanallah, Alaykum, subhanallah, Rabbul Arshil Kareem. So think about how you can inshallah ta'ala um, make use of this fund in manifold ways in Bidhnillahi ta'ala. Now, after this, once you're done, right? So just remember, be as comprehensive, critical, and sincere while maintaining the conciseness within 350 to 500 words, inshallah ta'ala. Now, once you're done, um, So I'm just going to show you what you would see, um, just so you're aware. So essentially, you'll get a confirmation message like this, right? And I just want to say that essentially, the third section, the one I said mentioned earlier about student nominations, would come in here, essentially. So your goal is once you apply, or sorry, once you submit the application, don't forget to say Bismillah, and especially as I've shown earlier, make dua and ask Allah for, or I didn't specify this before, but may Allah make it easy for all of you that apply to grant you rizq that He is most pleased with, rizqan tayyiba, pure rizq, right? And in fact, I'm going to say a dua, idhnillahi ta'ala, that is a blessed one of, and well, I'll say now, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. Allahumma inni as'aluka ilman nafi'a. Oh Allah, I ask you for beneficial knowledge, ورزقا طيبا, and pure provision, and وعملا متقبلا, and actions or deeds that you are pleased, متقبلا, that you accept, that you would accept, so that you accept, subhanallah. Like, this is really my goal as well. Jazakumullahu Khairan Katheera for your patience, sorry. So astaghfirullah. Alhamdulillah, Brian. So, inshallah ta'ala, I mentioned that there would be eight nominees required. So, I would say essentially, once you're at that step, I'd recommend essentially, um, pretty much they would be able to see this form, and from the link that you would essentially share with them, make sure that they also submit the nomination on time, right? So, for example, if you finish it, today's date's the 10th of February. Let's say you finish the application by the 17th. You would give enough time, inshallah ta'ala, for even you could be done in, let's say, by Friday, in Jum'ah, right? The 14th, right? You would give your nominees, you can even not only have more than 10 nominees or 8 nominees, but inshallah ta'ala, give them enough time over a month to simply fill in the Google form, right? Which is, generally speaking, inshallah ta'ala, I hope, easier to fill in. And inshallah, for those that are planning to get into like grad school, this is like a mini prep actually from the fund itself. Pretty much the idea is like, if we go back once again, like you want to be able to, you know um, like highlight your academic merit, your extracurricular involvement, right, through your CV and resume, and also highlight from your reflections, your thoughts, your responses, two short critical essay like questions, right, and on top of that, I do want to highlight that this is all Islamically oriented, right? Fi sabilillah, fi ridatillah. So think of it like this. You can have any XYZ scholarship, right? But what makes this one unique is not only that it's for Muslim students, but it's made by, and made for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, fi ridatillah. That's even sufficient itself. And within this, Allah has blessed me to, include, encapsulate, or include, you know, the the concept of supporting Muslim leaders from a Muslim-led, inshallah ta'ala, Muslim-inspired fund, right? So, and inshallah ta'ala will be accounting for that and keeping that in mind for inshallah ta'ala decades to come. So I would just say once again, stay aware of this and also the student rankings and testimonies, right? The sooner you do them, the better, right? And even I'd like to do applications and like, or not to say this of myself, but astaghfirullah, but think about like being the best that you can. Start preparing now, and inshallah ta'ala, you see the fruits of your endeavors soon. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept them from you and us all. Allahumma ameen. Now, if you have questions, you can also reach out to me from my UFT email, Mohammed, Mohammed dot Said at mail, at utoronto.ca. So you may just note that as well. You can reach out to me. Your nominees can also, if they have questions, if you want as well. Inshallah ta'ala, I would say have a look at this. If you have questions and you have my contact as well, you can also reach out to me if needed. Once again, share this out with friends and family. Share this with your community circles, your majalis, different, group chats as well, and organizations that want to sponsor, have a donor themselves, like they can donate, specific amounts, dedicated amounts, monthly, yearly, on a regular basis, or at one time. But subhanAllah, imagine if like you have, let's say the MSA, be a donor for one MSA student leader and Islamic Relief UTSC for another Muslim student leader, and Penny Appeal, or like, I'm just saying examples, but it could be like humanitarian, like there's so many avenues. In fact, even institutions like UFT, right? Or like, and Allah knows best, but I really want to ensure that there's this inclusive and Islamically authentic mindset, Keely, exclusively, that really expresses the understanding of doing this for the sake of Allah, for Allah, one, and two, through the Quran and Sunnah, three, to ameliorate the condition of our Ummah, Muhammad Sallallahu and magnify the potential of the scholarship in this regard, in this mindset, in an inclusive, authentic, and inspirational methodology. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept this from all, us all, and indeed He is the Creator. He alone do we submit. I seek guidance, truly. Ameen, Ya Rabb. And you suffice for us alone. Before I end off, inshallah ta'ala, I do want to say as well that, inshallah ta'ala, if you're interested in being involved in, let's say, our golden age, and let's share off the screen, but let's say if you want to be involved, like get some updates as well. Inshallah ta'ala, our Golden Lab series may continue for this week remotely. I'm seeing if, and this is just an update, more recent update, but we'll see. Whatever pleases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala most is what I ask for His guidance in. And we may also do it in person again. And so, those that don't know, essentially these are intensive laboratory seminars where inshallah ta'ala, go over student techniques and practical materials or exercises for students in groups and individually, so that they excel in academically. I'm, alhamdulillah, one of the TAs for AO2, an introductory biology class, and microbiology. But nonetheless, excluding those details, right? I just want you to get an idea that really we aim to provide an Islamically enriched and authentic methodology to integrate the Deen, Islam, your intellect and profession all in one organization for the Lord of all dominions, the Lord of all dimensions, the Lord of all directions, and really, subhanAllah, of the Lord of all provisions. So this is, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept it from us all. Ameen, Ya Rabbil Alameen. As well, Resonation, inshallah ta'ala, for those that don't know, is a weekly Surah Al-Kahf program. And I talked about it just a bit for resonation, right? To resonate. And that's really the idea that we're resonating with the Quran as one nation, right? Because even if it starts with one person shares it with another, and it just multiplies in effect 1 to 2, 2 to 4, 4 to 8, 8 to 16, 16 to 32, 32 to 64. And that also relates to microbiology, but exponential growth and biomathematics, etc. But something nonetheless to appreciate integratively, but most importantly, Islamically. So, and we talked about tenfold increases, right? So that's even logarithmic, logistically far more, and Allah is the most merciful. Jalla Jalaluhu fi ula. So I would just say, keep us in your du'as, right? Resonation is a weekly Surah Al-Kahf program where we recite Surah Al-Kahf chapter of the cave, chapter 18 of the Noble Quran. So inshallah ta'ala, have a listen, attend and reflect and resonate with the Noble Kitab Allah Aziz al-Hakim. And inshallah ta'ala, I hope if Allah wills, we'll be able to continue this during the month of Ramadan, especially when, the course, like the our Golden Lab series will literally, inshallah, coincide with our Golden Quran series, and inshallah that may be a more daily magnified impact of resonating with every juz, if Allah wills, of the Noble Kitab Allah Aziz al Hakim. So stay tuned, inshallah ta'ala. In the meantime, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us all success. Ameen. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be most pleased with us in this life. Ameen. And may Allah allow us to be amongst as-sabiqun, as-sabiqun, أولئك المقربون في جنات النعيم ثلة من الأولين ثلة من الأولين sorry قليل من الآخر أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم من الأولين وقليل من الآخرين. And actually, I want to highlight this surah because it's Surah Al-Waqi'ah. I'm just going to read it just to clarify. Astaghfirullah wa May Allah forgive me, but subhanallah, Rabbul Arshil Kareem. SubhanAllah, it's actually one of my favorite ayat. And inshallah ta'ala, I'll briefly show it, what I was referring to. وَقَلِيلٌ مِّنَ الْآخِرِينَ Subhanallah, Rabbul Arshil Kareem. The page just actually disappeared, subhanAllah, but let's just, in brief brevity, they are many of the early generations and few of the latter generations. SubhanAllah, may Allah allow us to be close in proximity to them and be amongst them and lead amongst them, be amongst the leaders, best of all leaders, the best leader of them. Ameen, Ya Rabbil Alameen. This is my sincere request. May Allah accept from us all. Ameen, Ya Rabbil Alameen. Barakallahu feekum. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik. Nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. Jazakumullahu Khairan Katheera. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you and your family. Allow us to be reunited in Jannatun Na'im. Barakallah. Ameen Ya Rabbil Alameen. Assalamu barakallahu feekum. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.